All right, well, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 9:03 on August 25. A special called meeting of the Audit Committee. All members are present. Vice Chair Lombard, Dick Cody, John Goggin, myself, Dan Hughes as chair, and Jim Steele is present telephonically. Also present is Andre Heitig from the staff. If you'll all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible for all.
In the package which Andre has just handed out, includes the agenda which had been previously sent to us by email. I am going to ask that we add to the agenda after the other items shown thereon and before adjournment, members' items. This is something which customarily done in the other committees and in the town council as well, and the LPA, and like I said, other committees. And I think we need to, as a matter of procedure, put that on our agenda so any member of our committee can bring something up at the conclusion of the regularly scheduled agenda items.
Chairman, I think we ought to do that just by unanimous consent.
All right. Anybody have any objection to that?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Sir, before you move on, may I remind you that you need to vote on allowing Jim to participate in the meeting. It needs to be on the record during the meeting.
I can't hear that. Sorry, I can't hear you.
He's as I understand it, he said that we have to vote on allowing Jim to participate in the meeting. I don't know why is that required?
Apparently that's required. The deputy town clerk instructed me to let you know that it needed to be done formally during the meeting at the beginning. Otherwise, he would not be allowed to participate.
You know, we've had meetings before where people...
Yeah, I've been at a number of meetings where we haven't...
I know Dick has a couple times, and we've never had to have a vote. But if we need a vote, I move that Jim Steele be officially considered part of the meeting.
Well, for the record, does anyone have any objection to Jim Steele participating in this meeting by telephone?
No.
There being no objection, we approve his participation by phone.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we begin, can I ask a question? I never received an agenda for this meeting. I don't know if I have one now, but I may, but I don't remember receiving one anyhow, by email or otherwise. I'm not sure this meeting was actually called officially. Look for somehow some notice of the meeting on the town's website. I found no notice of the town's having a meeting today. I see we do have a member of the public, so somebody found out about it. I guess that's a member of the public, staff person. So there's no members of the public, not that we're overflowing we normally overflow with members of the public, but occasionally there's a press person here, which of course would be a good idea, particularly in today's subject matter. I really seriously question whether or not we officially meet today. Now, I have no objection with proceeding, but I guess I would seriously question whatever official action we might take, because I just don't think we've met the, I guess I would seriously question whatever official action we might take.
Why is it?
Somebody talking?
It's his echo.
Oh, my echo?
I don't know why.
Maybe I should be talking directly into this thing. But anyhow, I have no objection for us if we continue to have discussions and so forth, but I would seriously question whether or not anything we do would have official sanction.
That's an interesting point. I never got an agenda.
I did.
The
Did you, John?
agenda was attached to the email of the notice.
Yeah, there was two. There was the minutes
Yeah.
and an agenda.
Minutes
and then
and the
I asked
agenda.
Robert and Andre sent a copy of the
Okay.
current
I
resolution.
saw that. Can I see the agenda?
It's in your
It's
packet.
in that, what he just handed out. But I received this by email.
Oh, okay, I see it.
I may not have opened up the attachment.
Well, I thought I did, but if I didn't, I withdraw my objection.
It was in the email that Robert Lang sent advising us that the meeting was to be held today. And there were two attachments, as John has pointed out, the minutes of the April meeting and the agenda.
That's good. Well, but the other point, what about the notification, public notice?
Well, I think you've raised a good point. In fact, I was going to raise this as well. What kind of notice what notice is sent out for our meetings other than an email to the members?
Well, my answer is I'm not familiar with those procedures. I would really have to
Okay.
check with the deputy town clerk. I know that the deputy town clerk was aware of the meeting, so I'm quite sure that it meets all the requirements. Otherwise, she would have probably not, she would have advised me not to continue with the meeting.
I'm not understanding what Andre is saying, but maybe it's the sound system.
Well, I didn't have my microphone
But
on.
I would, I've always seen notices posted on bulletin boards and so forth when we've had meetings, and I also want to point out that I did check with the official town website, and I saw no notice that there was an audit committee meeting. I did see a notice about the local planning agency's meeting being canceled and so forth, but I saw no mention of the audit committee meeting in any public.
Well, I'd like to, in regard to this, it's of note that this is the second consecutive meeting in which our mayor, who is our liaison, did not get notice. And I called him this morning, and he had another commitment. This goes not only to the lack of notice, but the lack of what should I say?
Courtesy?
Well,
Courtesy?
yeah, courtesy. And we've been scheduling meetings at odd times. It seems to me we've got to get back to our regular scheduled time. I know that this is unusual, Andre, and we're not picking on you on this. This is another point, the notice did not say whether it was going to be at council chambers or by virtual meeting. And I think one of you made that inquiry as to whether or not we were going to come to the town council or not. But I think that's something that, Andre, if you would take back to your Robert and whomever in charge of the noticing here, that I think we've got to be a little more correct here in our.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just add one more point here. If there was a lack of notice, and I think there was a lack of public notice, I'm still wondering whether or not whatever actions we take will have any official outcome, because as I understand it, meetings are supposed to be noticed so the public is aware of what's going on. Andre.
Well,
I just wanted to let you know, Cheryl just actually checked with the deputy town clerk regarding your concerns.
Could you speak?
I'm trying to speak in the microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Cheryl, one of our staff members, the assistant finance director, just inquired with the deputy town clerk. There is no requirement to send notice to the public for this type of meeting. However, the meeting was published or is published on the website. So there is
Was?
no question about the legality of the meeting itself.
It was published on the website?
Yes, it is, according to the
What
town clerk.
website was that published on? 'Cause I looked carefully at that website. I went to all the arrows, all the places to look. I didn't see it.
No, I just did a.
Not much is going on anyhow, Amy, so.
All right, you're wondering if this was posted publicly. It is on the town's website. It's been on there for approximately a week under our calendar, that there is an audit committee meeting this morning
I looked at the
at
calendar.
9 a.m., and it has the agenda posted with it, so.
Maybe I just don't know how to use the website. I must have clicked on, I bet you, minimum 10 calendars. I saw lots of council meetings and LPA meetings. I didn't see anything about an audit committee meeting.
On the town's website, you roll down about midway down the page, there's a calendar with every meeting coming up. If you need, I'll show you how to find it
Okay, that's good.
afterwards.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, but it is up there. It's been up there for approximately a week already.
Good. Okay.
Right, and anybody that wants to know how to find it easily, just holler at me after the meeting and I'll show you how to find it.
So Amy, I'd like to piggyback on that I do go to that website and I've navigated that and it's horrendous, just an aside, but there is an inconsistency with different committee meetings. I serve on other committees and sometimes they're posted, sometimes they're not. I do believe that we can legally do what we're doing because we're making recommendations and council's going to take final action on that, but just if you take it back to the PIO or whoever, they need to improve that communication vehicle, whether they use their new thing that they've got out there, that, I don't know what it is now, newsletter or whatever, but it is very difficult to find out who's having meetings and when, unless it's a very hot topic.
Take that back to them, and just so you know, we're in the process right now of redesigning our website, so
Thanks,
hopefully
John.
those things become easier to find. I'll let her know, and we'll stay on top of that.
All right, well, let's see if we can't be more efficient in that regard in the future. Now, we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which are the minutes. And we have before us the minutes of the Tuesday, Tuesday, April 28, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion or a comment regarding those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I move those minutes be now approved.
All right,
Second, Cody.
motion by Lombard, second by Cody. Any objection to, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, those minutes are unanimously approved, and those, those approve the October 19 minutes, but we had a meeting, bear with me a moment here. We had a meeting on, on March 9th. But I don't believe we've ever had any minutes on. We've got the October minutes here that were approved in April. The April minutes don't approve the March minutes. So I would ask Andre to check on that and bring the attention of who prepares our minutes, Andre?
That done based on the video? Okay. Very lens, okay. It's a stenographer who actually listens into this meeting or watches the video and then subsequently, I'll take my mask off, and then subsequently issues the minutes.
Does anybody disagree with me? We don't have any minutes of our March meeting.
I don't disagree with that. I think I remember us maybe even mentioning that at the April meeting.
I'll make a note of it, and if indeed this is missing, I'll make sure that it's added to the agenda after the next meeting.
All right, so on that April 28th meeting, this committee, I was absent because I didn't get notice. At least I alleged not to because my internet was down though. But you referred the audit report and asked that I appear before the town council. I did appear before the town council on May 4 and reported on the action of the audit committee of April 28th. And was met with a groundswell of apathy by the town council. And just let you know that I did report at that same meeting. I also in reference to several other matters, including that problem with the ordinance 1701 on the election advisory committee conflict with our ordinance.
Has that been resolved?
Pardon?
Has that been resolved in any?
No, to my knowledge, and that's why I'm bringing it up again. I would bring to attention to the staff that there's still a conflict between the language of the selection advisory committee and the state statute on the audit committee on who approves the audit. And recommended to the town council that they consider an amendment to that. I don't, my knowledge, it has not
In other words,
occurred.
Mr. Chairman, the activities of the election committee are superfluous in this regard because the statute is pretty clear. This is the committee who considers the audits. It's responsible for advertising and the selection of the audit.
Right.
And that's what the state statute says. It's almost as important as the United States Constitution, I suppose. So if there's an ordinance or another committee that conflicts with that, I would guess that the statute would have precedence.
Well, I think we've learned from that last fiasco last year that the audit committee is exempt from that provision of the selection advisory committee where there's a preliminary review by a selection advisory committee and they actually make the appointment or the recommendation to the town council. So I don't think it'll happen again, but nevertheless, the ordinance is there and it's inconsistent and it should be amended. Okay. Having kind of...
Sir, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I would like to add something about your reference to the state statute with regarding to the audit committee. I have brought to the attention of the town manager that there was another change in the state statute, which was fairly recent, just less than a year ago. So it probably needs some additional review. Unfortunately, I didn't bring those documents with me, but there were some minor changes which do require some changes to the audit committee based on the change in the statute. In my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but I forwarded it to the town manager.
Well, if that's the case, Andre, would you mind sending those changes or whatever documentation you have on those changes?
But what I can do is, because I'm not a lawyer, so I can only forward the state statute as it has been revised last year for your review. I advised the town manager that this change was there and that, in my opinion, probably needed some adjustment. That's
Well,
also subject to review by the town attorney.
see, it's still very hard for me to understand you, Andre. I hope I'm getting through. But if you just send it to statute, then we won't be aware of what changes were made in the statute. So is there any documentation of what the changes are?
Yes, I will have that for you.
That'd be good.
Well, Robert Lang mentioned that to me in one of our telephone conversations, and I asked him to send that information to me. I have not received it. So,
And do you know what the nature of these changes were?
yes, one of the things he told me was that the chair should be the mayor of our committee.
Correct.
Yeah.
The chair should be the,
Which removes me from my position. And
Doesn't make any
could
sense.
you
And
just,
apparently the town council's not aware of this, the mayor's not aware of this, but if the town attorney is aware of this, somehow he hasn't communicated it to the mayor.
in other words, our mayor, Ray Murphy, should be the chairman of this committee.
Yes, that's what Mr. Lang told me on the phone.
Doesn't make any sense.
Let me just reiterate that I noticed a change in the state statute. I brought it to the attention, and I said, in my opinion, some changes need to be made, but it needs to be reviewed by the town attorney. I'm a CPA, not an attorney. But in my judgment, it did appear that the mayor needs to be chairing the committee in accordance with the change in that statute.
Doesn't make any sense.
Whether it makes sense or not, that's not my judgment.
And
Yes.
could we just
Yes, John.
request that the town attorney give us a review and a synopsis of the current law as of less than about a year ago that Andre's referencing, the previous law, and any recommended changes? In other words, we're going to spend our time going through with
Absolutely.
basically one attorney here looking at stuff, the rest of us. So I make a motion that we request from the town attorney a review of the current statute against the previous statute, state statute, with recommendations as to what changes need to be made to our ordinances.
All right, there's a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion by Goggin, seconded by Lombard. Any discussion? All the question, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimously approved. Andre, will you communicate that to the appropriate people, including the town attorney?
Hope the minutes pick that up too.
Yes. It'll be interesting to see what that provision is. All right. Guess now we can, ready to go to what's on the agenda here, and that's discussion of deletion of town investment policies. And Andre, I'm going to call on you to give us a background on why we're here today discussing this issue.
I'll be glad to do that. That's why I prepared the packet for each of you, so I recommend that you follow some of the documents that I included. Bring your packet. Okay. Within the packet, there is a copy of the Florida statute, which actually has the provisions regarding the investment policy of a local municipality. This is Florida State Statute 218415 regarding local government investment policies. I guess back in 2013 or 14, a resolution was adopted by the town council for a new investment policy, which was based on this state statute. Why we're here today is that this state statute does not require a local municipality to have an investment policy. It is an option under this state statute. And I want to point out, when you go through this, there are several sections. I think it goes through section 24. Section 17 is the provision that allows a municipality to not have an investment policy. And if you don't have an investment policy, there are restrictions with regard to the investment or the type of investments that can be made by the town. Why we're here is that during the most recent audits, we had some findings in the auditor's report because the town did not comply with part of the statute. Because we did adopt an investment policy, we have to actually follow all the provisions from 1 through 16. And if we fail to do that, we will have an audit finding. The one that we failed on, the last two audits, is section number 14 of the statute. Let me know if I go too fast for you. And that is regarding continuing education. If a town adopts an investment policy, the statute under section 14 requires that either the finance director or, in our case, the town manager, follow at least 8 hours of continuing education. And apparently in the last 2 years, that created some difficulty for our finance director to actually meet this criteria and do 8 hours of continuing education. We have 2 audit findings. We cannot afford to have a 13th one. We were actually looking at it as like, how important is this investment policy of the town with regard to the law itself? I think that the intent of the law is to protect the public funds of each unit of local government. That is the main intent. It regulates what type of investments a local government can actually invest in. If a town has an investment policy, it is allowed to invest in a broader range of investments, which ultimately means that you're allowed to take a little bit more risk if you have an investment policy. If a town does not have an investment policy, the town provides for a more limited, more restricted number of type of investments that the town can invest in. Now, coincidentally, the town currently and in the past has really only invested in the more restricted type of investments. So we don't need the investment policy to allow us to invest in a broader range. We are already within the restricted range. As a matter of fact, somewhat odd perhaps, the investment policy itself that was adopted in 2014 also restricted the range of investments, section 17. It seems to be odd because you really want to have an investment policy if you probably want to also have a broader range of investments. So the question is like, why do we need the investment policy if it is not required, if the town actually does already and has invested in the past only in the more restricted type of investments that are allowed under the statute in section 17. Also, additionally, we had 2 audit findings on section 14 because the finance director nor the town manager, either of them did not follow 8 hours of continuing education. There is also the possibility that an auditor might find other findings based on this particular statute. Section 22 of this statute requires the auditor specifically to test for compliance on this statute. Once you create an investment policy, the auditors will go through it, and there's multiple areas where they might find that, there is the potential of not being in compliance. So, after looking at this and taking into consideration that we already had 2 audit findings, the question is, what is really the need and the additional value of the investment policy? I think I speak on behalf of Mr. Langen and also myself that I believe that the investment policy adds a few things, but it's nothing that is really of significant importance. And I also want to refer you to another attachment in the folder, the liberty to actually print out the current investments of the town, or at least what would be regarded as investments under the statute. And you will find that, first of all, the amount, call it relatively speaking for the town. If it was my own money, I would say it's a lot, but for the town, it's a reasonable amount of money. About $2.6 million is currently in investments. About $2 million of that is invested in what are called intergovernmental investment pools. Those are authorized under the statute. You don't need 8 hours of continuing education if you follow Section 17. The other type of investments are very simple certificates of deposit. It doesn't require a finance degree or a lot of knowledge or experience in investments to put some money in intergovernmental investment pools or CDs. And I think the statute reflects that by allowing these investments without an investment policy. You can see the total amount under paragraph 2 is that we have about $600,000 worth in 3 different CDs, which are staggered, because we have to follow the provisions of the law, which says that first we have to have regard for the safety of the funds, second, the liquidity of the funds, and finally, to create income without incurring too much risk. I think all these investments that a town is currently invested in are well within the range of what is allowable without an investment policy. Also, to give you a better perspective, because you might wonder, we have $2.6 million invested. Doesn't the town have more money in the bank, so to speak? And the answer is yes. However, the rest of the money is mainly in our bank accounts, and those are not really considered investments. The town made the decision on October 1st, 2018 to switch to a different bank, First Florida Integrity Bank. We made the switch from SunTrust to FFIB, and one of the big advantages is that what I would call simply like our operating account is kind of like a checking account, or what most people consider a checking account. Nowadays, you don't get any interest with those banks. We get a considerable amount of interest with FFIB. During the first year or so, I believe the interest rates were between 2 and 2.5%, which is quite a bit for just a checking account. And just prior to the interest rate collapse as a result of COVID in March, we were still earning, I believe, around 1.6% in that bank account. All of that was either higher or equal, at least, to the rate of return on a 3-month Treasury bill. Current investment policy aims for at least a rate of return on our investments equal or exceeding the 3-month Treasury bill. Our bank account by itself already exceeds. Other investments that I listed, the CDs and the intergovernmental investment pools, exceed that even by a higher or by a somewhat higher amount. So also there, the investments are well off the range of what is even currently in the investment directive of the investment policy. So I personally no real significant reason to maintain the investment policy, which creates the risk that the auditors might go through each and every line item of our investment policy to see if we're in compliance, risk an audit finding, while the statute clearly allows us not to have an investment policy, and our investments don't really require that because we are within a low-risk investment.
Well, Andre, I don't disagree with the anything you said. I just have a basic issue here. Apparently there's a policy change here at the council level. Mr. Lang indicated to me that the council has discussed this and has decided that they are willing to eliminate the investment policy, provided we agree or recommend to do so. I've talked to Ray Murphy, and he has no recollection whatsoever of the town council discussing this matter. It seems rather peculiar to me that in 2013, we spent 4 months, or 5 or 6 months. I have my file on the investment policy, and we've got 6 different drafts of the investment policy we spent hours on preparing at that time. And I guess my question is, if an investment policy is of virtually no significance to the town now, why was it of no significance then? And could it possibly be of significance in the future?
Well, of course, I've been with the town for only 2 years, so I don't know what actually busted or made the town council and audit committee at the time decide that we should have an investment policy. I'm just speculating. I'm not sure if maybe that was the time that the state statute was enacted and people started taking a look at it. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just speculating. But again, I find it interesting when you look at the attachments in the folder. I have included both a copy of the investment policy as well as the state statute. And the investment policy largely mirrors the state statute itself. So if you have an investment policy and suddenly you get 16 requirements that you need to meet in your investment policy, those 16 requirements are mirrored in the investment policy.
That's correct.
So I'm
It
just
just
wondering.
seems that one issue is what's precipitated that.
Exactly.
To it, the attendance at continuing education issues. Well, it all boils down to that particular provision, it seems.
Well, the audit findings, the last 2 audit findings are, of course, the main reason that we're discussing this issue right now. But I want to point out that just having the policy, it doesn't only require continuing education. The law requires that, but the investment policy is mirroring some of the other, or most of the other provisions in the state statute. And technically, an auditor could go check to see if we're in compliance with everything in our own investment policy. So they could potentially, I'm not saying that we're not complying with it, but it just opens the door for a lot of merely technical issues than substantive. And I think that is the main reason why we are advocating repealing the current investment policy, given the fact that the town does not invest in risky investment currently, is not even allowed under the current investment policy to do so, because the investment policy, I find it somewhat odd, actually reflects with regard to the range of investments, reflects Section 17. And Section 17 of the state statute is really meant for municipalities that don't have an investment policy. So why adopt an investment policy restricted range?
Chairman, I had thought that until just now, this discussion, that the reason that Robert gave, or somebody I thought gave, for not having this continuing education is because the town had no investments. I thought I read that somewhere. I thought
Well, he gave me 2 reasons by phone. One was the continuing education requirement that they didn't really feel was necessary and they didn't comply with, and therefore was written up in the audit report, and that it didn't matter, that it wasn't really important anyway because the amount of investable funds was de minimis.
Well,
That would have been,
I guess 2.6 million, is that what it is, Andre? Is de minimis?
It's not, I would not consider that.
In some
de minimis.
circles, 2.6 million is a good piece of change. In any case, I thought, instead of de minimis, I just thought the reason given was there were no investments, and so it was just a moot point, and the continuing education didn't seem to be necessary. And as a consequence, I developed an amendment to the investment policy, which would allow the city manager, the town manager, to waive the requirement. However, when I look carefully at statute, section 218, yeah, Andre's shaking his head no. That wouldn't work because the statute requires a continuing education as long as you have an investment policy. So my amendment, even though I'm pretty proud of the words I put together, wouldn't work anyhow. So we're left with the question of whether or not we want to repeal or recommend repeal of the investment policy. I remember we spent a lot of time on the investment policy. I don't know what others think. I think the investment policy is pretty good, and as a matter of fact, it does track pretty closely with what's in the state statute. So others may have misgivings about that policy. I think it's a good one, and I think it's one that I think any town would be wise to comply with or try to comply with. Section 17 pretty much gives you an exemption from any of the restrictions. One of the things I'm particularly wonder about is, Andre, you can answer this. We have the investment policy requires a cash flow analysis, a periodic cash flow analysis to determine how much, based on the current outlook, cash outlook, might be available for investments. Do you have the current copy of that cash flow analysis? Can we see it?
No, I don't have it. I do know that I regularly meet with the finance director about cash flow issues. I had also prepared for this meeting because I kind of like expected perhaps we were going. Some additional information with regard to cash flow within the town and some things that I think in the past might have been overlooked. The amount of funds available, because keep in mind, this statute is not about investing all the funds of the town. This is only about what they call the surplus or excess funds, which are not necessary for the operations of the town. It's only the excess that falls under the investment policy. Everything else should not be invested.
The policy says that investments will be made in interest-bearing securities in accordance with known or anticipated cash needs.
Correct.
And based on cash flow projections that enable the town to meet current expense and debt service payments. The question once again is, do you have a copy, or can you point us to a copy of the most recent cash flow analysis?
I would have to ask Mr. Lang to see if he actually made one.
And the cash flow analysis, Mr. Chairman, is something that the finance office should be presenting to the town manager. The town manager, in turn, should be advising the town council of the content of that cash flow analysis, because that then would put the town council in a position of deciding whether or not we're sufficiently invested. They're the ones that ought to be making that decision anyhow. At least they ought to be overseeing the matter. I understand the finance director and town manager do have authority to make these investments, but they do require oversight. And that's the purpose. That's the purpose in the investment policy of requiring the finance director to prepare this cash flow analysis.
I cannot confirm whether or not.
Excuse me, Andrea. Let me just finish my thought, and then you can have the floor again. But I just think that's prudent cash management. I think that's prudent investment policy, and I think that's a good reason to have the investment policy, frankly, because it requires a rigor, it requires a regimen of doing the appropriate analysis to decide whether or not we are sufficiently invested, and gives town council an opportunity to oversee that see that process and decide whether or not the 2.6 million is sufficient or insufficient, or we're overburdening ourselves. Go ahead, Andrea, I'm sorry.
First of all, I cannot confirm whether or not Mr. Lang has those cash flow reports and has submitted them to the town manager. I do know that on a number of occasions we have had meetings or staff meetings regarding cash flow analysis. I also remember having one of those meetings myself with the town manager. One of the things that I want to point out is the 2.6 million. Again, we're talking about what we think is the surplus. What is often overlooked, I think by many people in management, are what I call working capital requirements, particularly with regard to the construction projects of the town. I think many members might not necessarily be aware of the amounts of cash that flow in and out, and the irregularity of those cash flows, which prevent us to consider them surplus, because I consider them working capital. Give you a simple example. I'm not sure how aware you are of how the town finances these large construction type projects. It's mostly done through the state revolving fund, SRF loans. The way these transactions are processed is that the town has to incur cost first. So we have to pay the contractor. Most of it is usually Mitchell & Stark. These bills could be sometimes varying from a couple of $100,000 to several $1 million at a time. Sometimes there are different segments of these projects that are being worked on, and at one point we were actually faced with a number of subsequent bills within a fairly short period of time, close to $4 million. That means that the town has to come up with $4 million, pay the contractor, then the process needs to start in order to get reimbursed under the SRF loan provisions, and sometimes that can take up to a couple of months. So you need to have capital, you have to have working capital available for these large constructions. So I can imagine that some people might see a balance sitting in, for example, the stormwater fund of $2 million. Well, sometimes we have requirements. We have to pay in advance, or not in advance, we have to pay the contractor after they have completed a certain portion. We pay that. That money is then gone. It's a cash outflow. It's not coming back as cash until we get it reimbursed. This is something different than having like a credit line with a bank where you can immediately take the money out when you need to pay the contractor. Then the effect is basically zero on your cash.
Chairman, we're getting into the weeds here.
We are, but I think it is important to...
Yeah, I understand, but see, if you look at this thing under the rubric of doing an appropriate cash flow or working capital analysis, to use your terminology, these are the things that ought to be revealed with such analysis. If we know what's going on in our construction projects and what our commitments are and so forth. That's the whole purpose of the discipline, of the regimen of having this periodic analysis made. In any case, Mr. Chairman, I think the statute and the policy covers that. Question is whether or not because it sounds to me like there isn't a routine cash flow analysis done. That's what I'm concluding from this discussion. I think it would be good to have one. I'd like to see it. I think the council ought to be seeing it too.
Yes, John?
Well, first off, I agree. I was under the impression, I certainly could have misunderstood the conversation, that this money we were talking about was overnight basically float. That's the way it was kind of explained to me, and that's why it appeared to be a minor amount. But now that I see how much it is, it's a little more out, and it's not just overnight float. There are investments being made. So the reason we're being asked to adopt the policy and make it a guideline is 8 hours continuing education. That to me is not a reason to change anything. It's 8 hours of continuing education over the course of a year. The town manager, the town finance manager should do that. They did it last year. Apparently it was done, but the timing of it was off, is the way I thought Robert explained it to us. And the other is that audit granularity, that with a policy like this, that the auditors will look at it with more of a fine-tooth comb, and I really don't have a problem with that whatsoever. Because if we're doing restrictive funds, which is what this appears to be, if we're doing very restrictive funds, they shouldn't find anything. And if they do, we'll put on us that we found a place where restrictive funds are not our best tool to do that. So at the present time, I see no reason to change this.
I have a question of Andre. Do the auditors, or have the auditors in the past actually gone through this thing as a checklist, checking off all of the provisions of the investment policy, to make sure that they've been complied with?
I cannot guarantee what the auditors have done. We know what their findings are. As you know, auditors do a lot of procedures that the auditee is not necessarily aware of. They usually report on their findings. This was their finding. They are required to, by law actually, the auditor under Section 22, to make sure that we are in compliance with this statute. So my assumption is that they must have reviewed the different provisions of the investment policy, but I cannot.
So the only provision of that policy that has ever come to light is the continuing education. And if everybody understands that either you do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to get written up, it's not a major weakness. Throw away the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. Get rid of the whole policy because the one little provision gets written up every year. I would think the town council could live with that little non-compliance. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Thanks, that was Dick, Cody. Jim, you were on the committee, as were we all, except for John, on the committee when we adopted this, and you were also served as the interim manager. I'd like your input here.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I do have a couple questions. One, my understanding the finance director worked Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. Where is he? Did you hear that?
He is, because of the COVID situation, he apparently has an arrangement with the town manager that he works remotely.
Yes, right.
But he is available for meetings that he is required to be at town hall. So he is here on a regular basis, but not like in the past before COVID. He would definitely be here 3 days a week. Now he's usually here when there are required meetings and works remotely from home, and is available to staff if we have any questions or emergencies.
Well, you know, Jim, let me just interrupt a minute. That's an interesting point. We got Jim on the phone. How come we don't have Robert on the phone?
Robert has stated in the email that he would be available at the request of the audit committee.
No, that's not the point. That's not the point. He's the finance director, and this committee has a significant influence on him. It just seems very strange to me. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, and then I have a follow-up question, Andre. What is the name of the new bank?
It is First Florida Integrity Bank, FFIB. It's a very small bank.
First Florida?
First Florida Integrity Bank. Your information, because maybe that's what you're wondering, this is a qualified public depository in accordance with Florida state statute. We have registered.
That's fine. I just want to know what the name of the bank was. And I noticed on your list of investments, you've got 3 CDs that are with Bank United, which is a different bank, correct?
Correct. Also a qualified public depository.
Okay. And under the investment policy, item 11, it says, whenever feasible and appropriate, town shall solicit competitive bids for a selective type of investment. Were those CDs actually bid out?
The CDs were, I don't know if they were bid out, maybe Cheryl. I don't know when these CDs were first started with Bank of United. At least it was before my time. Until now, we have rolled over the CDs after inquiring about the interest rates, and we have made small adjustments sometimes in the maturity, so that would be at least partially staggered for liquidity requirements. They were not bid out, at least not in the 2 years that I have been here.
Andre, when did you start?
August 2018.
All of these CDs were purchased after that date.
No, before that.
I have no other questions.
Well, Jim, in your experience as the interim manager, did you have occasion to make reference to investment policy?
Well, the first part, when I was interim town manager, we had too many other things to deal with. So I didn't really get into that until the last few months, and that's when Robert came in. So rather than try to blow everything up, I just let it slide and moved on.
All right. Well, are there any other comments from the committee?
I just say, I don't feel we should change this policy. There's not enough justification for doing it.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, not that I'm proposing this, but I'm just curious. It'd be good to have counsel here, or at least have access to counsel. Underlying this is a sort of a legal question, but I wonder if the town council has the authority under statute to set aside the education requirement. I just don't know. There's no provision to set it aside in 218, but I just wonder.
I don't think they do under the way the statute is set up, and the statutory mandate for continuing education is incorporated also into our investment policy. There's no provision for a waiver of that. The council has authority to elect not to have an investment policy under Section 17, but I don't believe that if they do have one, provision for continuing education is mandated. Can't be waived or eliminated.
So we come to the conclusion today that we're not recommending disposition of the policy. Town council still has the authority to do it.
Yes.
Without our recommendation.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone care to make a motion?
Motion to take no action?
I don't know if we need a motion. No. We would have needed a motion to rescind it, but maintained it. I think the minutes will show that the consensus was to not rescind it.
Well, is that in fact the consensus? Is there any objection to not having a motion to rescind or to recommend the elimination of the investment policy?
If it helps, Dan, I'll make a motion that we recommend they continue with current policy for investments under Resolution 1413. Make it a positive that we recommend they continue with the policy as it exists.
I think that's a more appropriate way to do it. Is there a second to that motion?
Second, Cody.
Motion by Goggins, second by Cody. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimously approved. Andre, I would like to say that you did an excellent job, in my view, of espousing the position, but the town audit committee just doesn't feel, take the same position, unfortunately, but leave it to the town council to decide.
Yeah, you had all the answers, Andre.
Well, you did well in representing the views of the staff. All right. As I said earlier, I think that we need to have an item at the end of our agenda, members' items, and I'd like to ask if any. I have some, but I'd like to ask first if any other members have anything they'd like to bring to the attention of the.
I have one.
Yes, okay, Jim.
I asked earlier in the meeting, where is the finance director? Which he's unavailable. But the question I have, is the finance director an employee of the town, or is he a hired consultant?
Mr. Lang is an employee of the town.
Is an employee, okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Have anything else, Jim?
No, that's it, thank you. Andre, you did a great job. Thank you very much.
All right. John, I know that you had a meeting on the Selection Advisory Committee on a bid since the last meeting. I was asked to be on that, and then I was fired from that because they made a mistake in asking me to be on it. I was delighted not to be because I had the slightest idea what it was all about. Or if you would explain to us what you were bidding on.
It was new IT services for the town. That included network, all the software applications, hardware, as well as the audio-visual in here that has worked so well over the last year and a half. And so there were 4 bidders. A firm called Vallejo Tech, I remember it was Vallejo, I think it was Vallejo Tech or something like that. Our current provider, and then 2 others. One was Xerox, and the 4th one was just an independent. Vallejo, there was 4 of us, I think, that finally did the review, and Vallejo came out on top on all of them. They were hands down, they had the greatest depth. They actually had 4 people on the bid evaluation, which I never heard of before, but they sat in on our evaluation of the 4 bidders to show that they're committed to it. And current provider, what we found out was, as we started talking to staff, they liked the personality of the person, but the quality and the responsiveness was not there. And anybody who's tried to listen to a town meeting through these microphones or tried to watch Zoom, that disaster in March when we first started holding meetings on Zoom and how uncoordinated they were. This firm, Vallejo, actually does audio video, and one of their references was a firm that they work with strictly on that, and so that's why they won hands down. And they were recommended at the last meeting to start negotiating a contract, and the town approved that.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering what that was all about.
By the way, it's a up to 4-year contract. Get some stability. And the one thing that I think is important to us is they are coming in and doing a pre-assessment before they begin of the entire system. We know we were hacked here before, which disturbed me to no end because we brought that up multiple times in here. But when they were hacked, the resolution was to take that system down and make people come in manually. That's just not acceptable, ever. Ever is that acceptable. that you don't fix it. And this firm will do that pre-assessment, and they'll get back to us and say exactly what the current system looks like, where its weaknesses are, and their recommendations before they even begin working, which I think is very important.
All right. Thank you. And while I got you, John, I was going through my materials and seeing what policies we have adopted over the years. We've adopted a budget policy, a debt management policy, a wire transfer policy, a check signing authority, in addition to the investment policy. I also noted I had a folder on accounting and internal controls policy, and that it was still an unfinished item. I'd
I'd ask
going
Andre for
on
an
with that?
update. Years ago, I guess, just before Andre got here, I worked with Robert for months reviewing policies. There was an individual here at the time, a young man who I was working with. He left, Andre came in. We were told at that time that Andre would focus on the policies, and I've asked Robert a couple times since then, and I have not seen any final policy manual, procedures, or anything that has been down in writing. So I ask Robert occasionally, and we're working on it. So maybe Andre can give us an update on where the policy and procedure manual is.
I can tell you that unfortunately, I think Mr. Steele also mentioned, sometimes a lot of stuff comes up and it prevents you from, doing some things that you had planned to do. And unfortunately, I've made a small start somewhere back in May on updating some of the internal controls and policies. But really, I cannot say that a significant amount of progress has been made up till this point. I did earlier on, somewhat of a rewrite that was for the first audit that I was going through with this town. I did somewhat of a rewrite of the existing internal controls policy to update it a little bit better to the current situation. So that one is still in place currently. That's the state of affairs, but it is an item that is definitely on the agenda of staff within the finance department. It's just that we have a multitude of events happening. Some recent staff changeover we've had. That is the state of affairs with regard to updating the internal.
Well, I think maybe we would like to have, think it's possible at our next meeting, we could have a report on that. John, how
Important are they?
how important is this, and how, well, I know it's important, I guess I should say, how important is it to get this resolved as soon as we can?
I think that the auditors have alluded to this before in their audits about procedures and written procedures and controls. The reason we pursued it hard to begin with was we were bringing in a brand new system. And when we brought in a new system, we had no handoffs. We had no description of where the handoffs were between manual and the system, what components were in the system. That's why we initially pushed hard and worked with them on it. We did some reviews of those things, and quite frankly, Dan, I just got tired of bringing it up every couple of meetings. I'll bring it up in the meeting, and I just, we're advisory and advise, but I'm not here to tell people what their workload is and what their priorities are. So all we do is just keep it burning about every 2 months at a meeting. I think it's important. I think it's important that the timing is good with the new auditors coming in, that we come up with, here's where the system is, here's what's controlled by the system controls, and here's what the manual controls to interface with it. I think it's, personally spending 50 years in this business, I think it's critical, especially with turnover that we get in the town. And I think that it's important to go along with, and I was going to bring this up in the member items, to support what Ed's talking about, the cash flow, and that the council see that cash flow, probably at their M&Ps, whether it's once a month or once every 2 months, 3 months, whatever that timing is. We're coming into an economic recovery that is going to impact cash flow. And we don't know what that's really going to look like. And I think it's critical that the town knows what that is, especially taking out a $10 million loan to start doing some capital improvements. I'm not opposed to them in any way, but I think visibility to the monies and the fluctuation in that cash is critical right now. And those procedures that show how we're managing to make sure nothing falls through. We've had audits now, this is my third audit I've been through, and every time we get year-end closings with a rationale as to why we got criticized in the audit. Well, I know there's transitioning going on, but at the same time, it's been at least 2 or 3 years we've had that, and I think procedures would eliminate some of those timing issues.
I thank you, John. I noticed on my notes on this, it was in an audit committee meeting on December 10th of 2018 that you brought this matter. You said you were working with somebody named Jamie. That's apparently who you mentioned. You were referring to some young.
The kid?
Yeah.
Again, it goes to the point, he was here 3-4 months, I think,
Yeah.
turned over, and he was the one they put in charge of it, which it says the priority.
All right. Well, Andre, I think you got the message there that we would like to see that followed up and resolved. All right. Ed, you got anything?
What is the status of the audit, the 2020 audit? Anybody know?
Informally, probably going to have a meeting at the end of September with the auditors, going over our procedures. And I believe we're scheduled to have field work done by the auditors in January.
Who's the auditor again?
Malden and
Malden
Jenkins.
Same one.
Yeah, same one as last year.
The reason I asked is, I still think that the loan that was authorized by council to be made by the general fund to the stormwater fund during the 2020 budget process still isn't reflected in the approved budget as a loan. In other words, I don't know how you look at the budget without and determine at this point that that over $300,000 from the general fund was authorized to be loaned to the stormwater fund. And the reason I'm connecting that to the audit is because that loan has to be repaid this year. And that's according to current budget policy that Dan alluded to, because one of the requirements of the budget policy, which is what, Dan, 1623, whatever it is.
It's 16.23, adopted whenever, but it's section, I believe it is, that you're referring to.
It does require that the loan be repaid within the year. So, according to the town's budget policy, that $300 and some thousand loan is required to be repaid. And I hope the auditors take careful note of this. Budget policy does provide that be extended to the following year, just to the following year, but action of council. To my knowledge, that's not been done. But I just want to point that out. I think we've talked about this loan before. I'm still unclear as to why it's not reflected in the approved budget. Perhaps I'm just missing it. I hope I am. But it clearly was made. It was part of the deliberations done by council on the this past September when they approved the budget. So I just wanted to make that point, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the the reference, you correctly pointed out, Ed, Section 6 of the budget policy, E says, council may by resolution authorize a temporary loan from one fund to another. They did that on September 23, 2019. And all loans must be repaid in the fiscal year they were approved. There were only about 11 days left in that fiscal year. Unless the council declared an emergency, so it must be repaid the following year. So I understand the first budget hearing is a week from Monday, correct, Andre?
Sorry.
So it's incumbent that budget has to reflect repayment of that loan in the current fiscal year.
Mr. Chairman, I cannot comment on this particular issue within our accounting department or finance department. Everybody has, duties, and one part that I don't do is budget. So I can really not give you a whole lot of information about budget. You would really have to talk to the finance director.
Hopefully, the finance director will somehow get word of this discussion and understand that this committee is, at least this member of this committee, it sounds like the chairman is, I can't speak for Dick and John or Jim, but we very much want to see that followed up, and we want to see the budget policy complied with, and bottom line, we want to see the loan repaid.
This is Cody. I have the same, I was going to bring that up myself. It beat me to it, so I agree, Ed.
Well, if you would, Andre, remind everyone that you can remind that this is a matter that should not be ignored in the budget proceedings. We'd appreciate that. Okay. Did you have anything else?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. Have we called on everybody?
And I just want to finish up. I would like to express with my colleagues, Andre, I thought this was one of the best prepared meetings. I know the result wasn't what you had advocated, but you had more information at your fingertips and presented it very, very well. And I hope we see this kind of preparation for meetings in the future. So kudos to you and the staff that helped him get this together.
I agree.
And I concur in that as well. Thank you, Andre. I have one thing, and that is our terms of office. I'm totally confused as to whose term expires when, because the schedules that were set up originally in the original ordinance were amended by ordinance, that later ordinance. Now our terms are different, and I don't know whose terms are expiring next month. Do you have that information for us?
Yes, actually, that was my final point that I would like to bring up for
very
this
good,
meeting.
very good.
It was
Okay.
pointed out through the deputy town clerk to remind all of you of filing your application if your term expires in October 2020. I added the form that you have to fill out. It's at the bottom of the packet in the folder.
Right.
So the form is there, and the members, and again, I would really like you to verify with the town clerk that this is correct, because I did get an email, and I'm assuming it is correct, but these are the members that, and the print is very small, but let me see, even with my glasses, it's not easy to read. But the following members' terms expires in October 2020, and that would be Mr. Huge, Cody,
2020?
October 2020, and Mr. Steele. Those are the ones on the list I have here. I have Mr.
So Hughes, Cody, and Steele?
Correct.
Hughes?
Yes.
Did you say Hughes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, but I would really like the other two members that Mr. Coggin and I guess Mr. Lombard are listed as October 2021.
Yeah, Goggin, yeah, Cody and Hugh, Dick, you and I were on the same schedule in the past, I know that. And,
I got a note that it was 2021, but I can't find it right now.
I urge you to verify the status with the deputy town clerk, because I don't know, the information that I have is actually current and correct. I believe it is, but you might want to verify so we don't get any disappointment.
all right, so we got to fill out this new form if we want to stay on. We got a new form here, I guess. All right, I'm hopeful, Jim and Dick, that you will feel free to continue the good work you've been doing on this committee, and will stay with us.
Here it is.
Jim needs the form, though, he's not here.
Dan, I had a quick question.
Yes.
What is a term? Is it 3 years?
No, that's changed too. I don't have that latest.
Because I was just appointed in October of 19, so it's
Yes,
only
you
1
were.
year. I'm surprised my term's up.
Right. I'm not sure, Jim. It was.
Okay, thanks.
It was changed in that last ordinance where they eliminated, they eliminated the ordinance dealing specifically with the audit committee, and they had a general ordinance dealing with all committees. And they lumped us all together as to terms and renewal dates and everything. I don't have that with me, but,
When was that? 'Cause I found the email that I got from Mayor on July 20th of last year. It has you and I at October of 2021. It has Lombard at end of last year, 2019. So this one has got to be out of date then. It doesn't have steel on it, so this goes back to last July, so
I think you probably have the most recent.
Again, this is what was mailed to me yesterday, but I don't know what the status
that's
of
from
this.
Michelle,
This is actually
from the clerk.
actually through the clerk, so it was from another employee that was asked by the deputy clerk to send it to me. So I'm assuming that it comes out of the office of the clerk. I can't confirm the validity of it, so I urge all the members to
I think we
verify
should
it.
check.
Town clerk.
All right, well,
Chairman,
yes.
I'm looking at the statute, 1806,
Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Section 6, terms of office. Initial terms of office of the agencies, boards, committees, or commissions shall be as follows. 4 members shall be appointed for 2 years in October 2018 and the subsequent even years. 3 members shall be appointed in October 2019 in the subsequent odd years. So
4 and 3,
it
that's
sounds
7.
like we're down
We
to-
only have 5 members, and that's 7 already. You know, it doesn't make any sense at all.
So the bottom line is that the terms of office are 2 years.
Last year it was Ed, myself, and Rodwell, the 3 that were up for reappointment.
Right.
I do not understand how poor Jim didn't get
Yeah,
2
you were
years,
up,
but-
you were reappointed. Lombard, Rodwell, and Goggin were reappointed in October 2019. I've got that down.
Yep.
And Dick and I were appointed in 2017.
Our terms ended last October. I have to go look at my file to see if I was
I
reappointed.
don't know. Well, that gets us to the point, another issue. We may not resolve this before our next meeting. Our next meeting, theoretically, we're supposed to have the meeting on the second Tuesday of every month. That would have been the second Tuesday of September, and that's only a week or so away. Is there any need for a meeting in 2 weeks?
From the side of the finance department.
Didn't think so. So, is there any compelling desire on the part of the members to have another meeting? I know it's the highlight of the month for all of you, and we look forward to it. Or should we definitely schedule one for the second Tuesday in October?
Chairman, it is my hope, my fond hope, that we get back to a regular meeting schedule. Now, whether that's once a month or once every 2 months, I'll leave that up to the chairman, not to staff member, but up to the chairman of the committee.
Well, I certainly agree with that. It should be a scheduled meeting, and that'll eliminate a lot of the confusion about the notice situation as well. So Andre, we would like to have a regular scheduled meeting on the second Tuesday of October at 9 a.m. Anybody?
I was just going to say, October, there are technically, I believe, still 6 members of this committee that they've allocated. We added Jim, and Jim was still on. But October is when they would appoint new members, so
Right.
I think it's appropriate that we definitely have one in October in case we do get this big influx of people that want to be on the audit committee, and they select that one out of the 1,000 that would be added to the committee. That would be the time to bring them up to speed.
Ed, the point of information, there's an EBIA meeting on the 13th. On Tuesday,
At 9 in the
at
morning?
9 in the morning. That's what, I have it on my calendar. You're the treasurer, so I don't know.
Well, of course, I don't have the authority to change that meeting. And that's the meeting dates are established in the documents. I have to sort that out. I just don't know how to deal with that right now.
I just wanted to point it out because you're setting up a meeting that is already in conflict. It's already set.
What's your pleasure?
Well, I don't have a pleasure because these meetings, EBIA meetings are set by the
set.
documents.
Yeah.
Tuesday of whatever, every quarter or something like that. And I suppose, I just don't remember the documents that well. I suppose there's some provision to change that, and I can try to do that to accommodate this committee. Because I do really strongly believe we need to have regular meetings on this audit committee.
Well, let's resolve this next meeting.
But
If-
whether they're
if-
once a
if
month
you-
or once
if-
every two,
if
that's
two
up
of
to
you
you.
aren't going to be here, we don't want to schedule it for that date.
We used to do the second Monday. It was never on a Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right, it is a Monday.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, Dick, you're right.
I'm on the LPA, and
It was a Monday.
I've got the LPA on my mind too.
I don't know, the 12th might be a holiday.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the second Monday of,
Yeah, that's good.
yeah.
Good catch, Dick.
But it's Columbus Day. I don't know if is the office open on the 12th?
The lady says affirmative, staff says affirmative.
Yeah, well, they're tearing his statutes down, so I guess we can have a meeting on that.
We just won't call it Columbus Day.
I'll call it Columbus Day.
The 12th then, okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Andre, Monday, October 12th, at 9 a.m. I already got that Tuesday.
There you go, Dick.
All right?
Are we agreed that each of us is going to check with the town clerk, or should one of us do it, or Dan do it, or one of us do it on behalf of the committee?
Well, I think to be safe, we just file this thing in the meantime. And we can also individually check with
All
the
right.
town clerk.
All right.
But this should be filed by the end of the fiscal year, by September 30th, I would assume.
I believe it's the 21st or 23rd, because I got one for public safety, and I think it said September 21st is the due date.
September 20,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's early, September 21st, I believe, 23rd, something like that.
It's only the ones that expire, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think the three of us should do that anyway, and then in the meantime, let's figure out what the hell the actual, we're correct here in our terms. Okay, well, being nothing else, I just have one other thing. I want you to know that I would be, normally, I'm be flying to Illinois, Ed, today to attend the
Olympic Fields.
BMW tournament at my home course. The PGA won't allow me to watch the tournament. Members can't even watch it.
Can't get on the court.
And my son lives on the course, so we'll be able to watch it there.
Why don't you volunteer, Dan? You can work.
Well, not even all the members got on as volunteers. My son's on the 8th hole, doing whatever that machine does that watches where the arc of the ball goes. What's that called? I don't even know.
Ball tracker or?
Yeah, that's what he's be doing, okay. So I want you to all feel sorry for me that I'm sitting still here, and, well, okay. Is there anything else?
This is Cody. I move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Lombard. Hearing no objection, the meeting is adjourned at 10:34. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
That was a good meeting.
Bye, Jim.
Bye.
You navigated that well, Mr. Mayor. All this paper I had prepared, and I thought I had it nailed.
It's too bad.
One thing to learn about the town, it changes rapidly.
Oh, boy. Sure what direction we're heading in, but
I didn't say that, I just said it changes rapidly. Nice job, Andre, really was. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, you articulated the position of the staff quite well.
Set the high bar.